who's next? Jeremy Corbyn MP, current and future leader of the Labour Party.
Thank you. The reason I look at my watch is there's another showing on shortly, isn't there? So 9 o'clock, so that gives us... No, it doesn't. Okay. It's all right. Okay, let's try again.
15 minutes.
Thank you all for coming tonight. And to me, this film is quite amazing because it brings back memories, but it also teaches us all a very, very big lesson indeed about what solidarity is about and how those lessons go on and on forever. When I was at the Durham Miners Gala this summer, it was huge. It was the biggest it's been for a very long time. And somebody said the political lesson of the Durham Miners Gala is that Margaret Thatcher and the Tories closed all the pits in Durham, thought they'd closed the NUM in Durham, thought they'd closed off that whole process of the political power of the mining communities, and forgot the principle of the strength and solidarity of the mining communities is absolutely there now, just as it was in 1984-85. You might close the pits, but you can't close the minds of people to what happened then and the need for real solidarity with those going through huge struggles at the present time. I remember the strike very well, of course. I was a newly elected Member of Parliament throughout that, in that period. And the solidarity was quite amazing, and also the frustrations to do with it. It was so clearly a political act by the Tory government that they were coming after the coal industry, not for any rational economic or energy policy needs. It was simply because of the power of the National Union of Mine Workers and the power and solidarity of the mining communities. And the solidarity that was given by a lot of different groups all over the country was a political opening and awakening which has never gone back and never been put back in a box and never will be. We in Islington organised a miner support group, and the council agreed to have a voluntary subscription every week from all council employees through their wages to the miners' fund, support the miners' funds, and we also had weekly collection points all over the borough. And I was very proud that we sent £100,000 to the miners from one borough alone, and that was repeated all over the country. But it's hard to think about that without thinking about the brutality that accompanied that strike. I remember driving to Hatfield Main in Yorkshire one day with a van load of food that we collected from Asian-owned businesses all around Finsbury Park and all around my constituency. We took this huge van of food there. As we were driving northwards up the M1, we saw coming southwards a military-looking convoy of about 200 police vehicles going south, the Met returning home. And then a few miles up the M1, we started overtaking a similar convoy going north. It was like the Yorkshire coalfield had been put under occupation by the police forces at that time. And the brutality of that is something we've got to live with for a long time. I see at the back the banner of Orgreave Truth and Justice campaign. Please support the Orgreave Truth and Justice campaign. We've got to get behind it. And it was the first question I put to Theresa May as Prime Minister was, when is there going to be an open public inquiry into what happened in Orgreave that day? Who ordered it? Who organised it? Who carried it out? And why so many people were injured on that day? Because if we don't do that, we haven't done justice for those that suffered at Orgreave that day. And when you start a campaign for truth and justice, to begin with, you're very isolated, very alone, and very unpopular. I remember being involved in the Guildford 4 and the Birmingham 6 campaigns when the public meetings we organised, the platform outnumbered the audience because, frankly, nobody wanted to know. Eventually, we won the release of all of those people who were so grotesquely and unjustly imprisoned for so long. So, those that suffered at Hillsborough, their families did the same. And eventually, they got their inquest, they got their justice. Let's have the same for Orgreave, let's have the same for the Shrewsbury pickets as well. And there were so many other acts of solidarity during that strike, taking food to people, going on picket lines at various places. And some of it was quite isolating, some of it was incredibly unifying. I remember one day going to Dungeness B power station to join an NUM picket line there, and it was so cold that nobody could speak because their teeth were chattering so much, so we sort of basically waved solidarity at each other in this freezing morning. But it was those simple acts of solidarity that were so important to the mining communities at that time, and the political lessons that have been learned from it. This film is fantastic because it shows the awakening of everybody to the way in which solidarity can and should be done, and the way in which closed minds can be opened up. But you're quite right, there's always been the most amazing tradition of solidarity all over South Wales. Solidarity with Paul Robeson, solidarity with people all over the world, solidarity with those during the American Civil War. There's been those acts of solidarity for a very long time. Large numbers of people from South Wales went to Spain to fight in the International Brigade to try to prevent the fascists taking over in Spain. And so think of it in terms of solidarity that's always been there. This film, I think, is incredible because it shows what happened, and despite the defeat of the strike in 1985, that incredible Gay Pride March in 1985, which is after the strike, when everyone was deeply depressed by the defeat of it, there was nevertheless that act of joy and solidarity through the streets of London that day. That was something that was very, very important and very memorable. And so we really rely on those that have gone before us for the rights that we have. And I was very pleased when the Labour Party conference did include those rights in the rule book of the party, and of course they're still there and should have always been there. But I have to say, there were an awful lot of people and an awful lot of organisations that could and should have done much more during the miners' strike. It wasn't the support of ordinary people that was lacking. It was the lack of political will in so many places that could, and I believe should, have changed the course of history and defeated the Thatcher government over the miners' strike and what they were doing to the coalfield community at that time. We then come to the political situation we're in at the present time. We have a government that is pretending on the steps of Downing Street through the words of the Prime Minister to talk about equality and justice and opportunities within our society. And then the very same government, 2 days later, takes away the last maintenance grants for students from working class communities going to university. The same government took away the educational maintenance allowance, which gave working class youngsters the chance to stay on in college and thus to get to university. The same government is now proposing the grotesque plan of bringing back the 11 plus to divide all our children at the age of 11. Surely our children deserve, all of them, each and every one of them, the very best that the education system can offer, not to be divided into first and second class students when they've barely finished primary school. Are we going to allow our communities to be divided by this one? And economic strategy, which is about tax cuts at the top and cuts at the bottom. Barnet Unison are here tonight, and they've fought a doughty battle. They've fought a doughty battle against the Ryanair style of local government that Barnet Council have that aspiration to achieve. They've stood up for the libraries, the nurseries, the public services of this borough behind against a council that ideologically wants to make all those cuts and all those changes of what it's done. And so this campaign now, which concludes in 2 days' time for the leadership of the Labour Party, is about a lot of things, but it's principally about the way we do politics in our society. The election last year was about saying we want a Labour Party that doesn't accept the principles of austerity and economic regulation to bring about greater inequality and poverty. Instead, we want a party that says we stand for something very different. We oppose austerity, we want to invest in people of the future rather than roll back the state and roll back the services and create greater poverty and inequality in the future. It's about a different economic strategy which John McDonnell has outlined during the past year. And it's also about standing up to mobilise people in the rights and justice in society. We walk in the footsteps of those that went before us, those that got us the vote in the first place, those that got women the vote, those that obtained a degree of justice for lesbian and gay and bisexual and transgender people, those that stood up against racism in so many ways. But every right you get is only defended if you continue to defend it and continue to argue for it. So I've been accused of spending the last couple of months going around the country addressing people who already believe and are already active. Well, it's a good thing to actually talk to people that you agree with, as well as people you want to persuade to agree with you. That is how movements are built. That is how unions are built. That is how political parties are built. And I followed the media very, very closely throughout the miners' strike in 84, 85, and some of it became obsessive by the media in that every conceivable thing Arthur Scargill said or did was automatically wrong, everything the NUM said or did was terrible, and their funds were taken away. The union was almost prevented from operating altogether. But it was maintained, and the strike was maintained by the solidarity of people with food, with clothing, and with money. And we stood up for those people. But it's those acts of solidarity that are so very important that we remember today. And so our campaign does unite lots of other campaigns. I'm not apologising for that, because I think that is what gives us the aggregation of strength, of views of a very wide range of people on a very wide range of causes. So we've put forward policy ideas in this campaign. We've united an awful lot of people, and I tell you this is the, I think, 56th campaign event I've been to in the past month or so, a month and a half, and we now have more than 30,000 volunteers helping in our campaign. That is a movement I think we should be very proud of. And it shouldn't be seen by anybody as a threat. It should be seen as something else. Surely the involvement in so many more people in active political life is a very good thing. So after this campaign is over, we will then go at the Tories and say, hang on, we're offering something different. We're offering to unite people around an agenda of opposing austerity. We're offering to stop wasting £9.5 billion a year on subsidising expensive rents in the private rented sector through housing benefit. Instead, we're going to invest in council housing. And instead of saddling our health service with expensive PFI contracts that cost so much and produce so little for the NHS, we're going to reorganise things so that that money instead goes into patient care and support. And our health service isn't run for the benefit of private companies that could leech off it. Instead, every NHS worker is an NHS worker, not somebody working for a private company. So all these things are very, very important. But, and I love the two songs, well, many songs in the film, the two I loved the most were Bread and Roses and The Power of the Union. Because in all of us, there's a cultural endeavour. This cinema is an example of that. It used to be called the Rex, it's now the Phoenix. It's been a place where there's been interesting films shown, unusual films shown, independent films shown. And I want us to have, and be proud of having, an arts and culture policy in this country that does give space to artists, to writers, and to young musicians. And wouldn't it be great if every school had access to music, access to culture, access to dance, so that every child could learn a musical instrument and develop from that. And then the film, the song at the end, sung by Billy Bragg, Power of the Union, it's quite incredible. It always moves me, that song, because it does bring people together, understanding each other's issues and struggles, but understanding when you do things together, you achieve things together. So those very brave people in the lesbian gay community who during the miners' strike went to the coalfields to give support, raised phenomenal sums of money to keep the strike going, they deserve a huge place in history for the bravery they did and the way they taught the rest of the country prejudice divides, prejudice damages, just as much as hate crime divides and damages. If a community turns in on itself, blames the nearest lesbian or gay, blames the nearest migrant worker, blames the nearest refugee, blames the nearest person who doesn't speak English and speaks some other language as being the cause of all their problems, you then create a whole miasma and nastiness of aggression, unpleasantness, and horror for the individual who's the victim of that prejudice. And you know what? At the end of it, you've built not one school, trained one doctor, produced one nurse, or done anything better anywhere. It's only when you bring people together, you achieve things. And our campaign is about uniting all those that want to see politics done in a different way. Policies coming up, not down. Ideas coming up that they may flower and we can all benefit from it. And to me, the media criticisms and attacks on us, obviously I prefer they hadn't taken place, but I tell you what, I don't get out of the bed in the morning and rush to the store and buy all the papers and shout at them. I instead want to get out there and do the campaigning, bringing people together in unity. And that's just what we've achieved during this campaign. That's what we're going to achieve in the future. And that's why the next generation should be a generation that is better off than this one, and the one after that should be even better off. So challenge the idea of an economic agenda from the neoliberals that the state can no longer provide health, no longer provide education, no longer provide housing, no longer house the homeless. The state somehow or other has to disappear from that. No, it doesn't. No, it does not. Those actions and communities across the USA are saying the same thing as we're saying here, as many people are all across Europe. This is a political movement to challenge economic orthodoxy, which creates inequality, injustice, poverty, and homelessness. We can, should, and will do things very, very differently. Thank you very much.